All right, picture this. It's World War II. The entire planet is locked in a desperate cage match for survival, and every nation is scrambling to invent the next big war winning super weapon. In America, the military industrial complex is running at full throttle. They're dreaming up jet engines, radar, and of course, the atomic bomb. But in some smoke filled room back in Washington, D.C., a few very serious men looked at a tiny, furry, flying mammal and had an idea so profoundly unhinged, so beautifully absurd, it almost sounds like a joke. They looked at a bat and said, let's strap a bomb to it. No, this isn't a rejected B movie plot. This is a completely true, spectacularly disastrous, and weirdly successful story of Project X-Ray. This was the time the US government spent millions of dollars trying to turn bats into an army of tiny, winged arsonists. It's the tale that proves when you're trying to win a world war, no idea is too crazy to try at least once. So, how does a plan this nuts even get off the ground? Well, it doesn't come from a 4-star general or a genius weapons designer. It actually evidently comes from a dentist. Seriously. A dentist from Pennsylvania named Lytle S. Adams in early 1942, just over a month after the attack on Pearl Harbor, Adams was visiting the famous Carlsbad Caverns in New Mexico. He stood there watching millions, literally millions, of Mexican free-tailed bats pour out of the cave at dusk, swirling, essentially a living tornado of leathery wings. Like most Americans, Adams was furious about Pearl Harbor and wanted to help. But while most guys were buying war bonds or enlisting, Adams' brain went somewhere different. He looked at that cloud of bats and then he thought about the cities in Japan. Unlike American cities made of brick and stone, Japanese cities were famously built with wood, bamboo, and paper. And that's when the light bulb went off. A brilliant, slightly terrifying light bulb. What if, he thought, you could attach a tiny incendiary bomb to each one of those bats? What if you dropped millions of them over a city like, say, Tokyo, just before dawn? The bats would do what bats do. Find dark, quiet places to hide for the day. They'd crawl into attics, eaves, and all the dark corners of those super flammable buildings. A short time later, poof, thousands of tiny fires would erupt all at once from the literal inside out, creating a firestorm that would completely overwhelm any firefighting response. It was a galaxy brain idea, but Lytle Adams wasn't just some crackpot. He was a man with connections. He happened to be an acquaintance of the First Lady, Eleanor Roosevelt. So, he did what any dentist with a plan for weaponized bats would do. He wrote a letter to the White House. Now, I get it. You would expect a letter proposing an army of bomb bats to be filed directly into the absolute not drawer. But this letter landed on the desk of President Franklin D. Roosevelt himself. And FDR, in a move that cemented this story in history, read the proposal and wrote a now famous memo to his top military advisors. He said, and I quote, "This man is not a nut. It sounds like a perfectly wild idea, but is worth looking into." And just like that, a presidential thumbs up, the Bat Bombs project was born. The US government was officially in the business of weaponizing bats. With the green light from the very top, the project was given a top secret status and a budget that would eventually hit $2 million. Guys, that's over $30 million today. A team of scientists, engineers, and bat experts were assembled to turn this dental fantasy into reality. Their task was simple on paper, but a logistical nightmare in practice. First, they needed bats, a lot of bats. They went straight to the source, capturing thousands of Mexican free-tailed bats from the caves across Texas and New Mexico. Jesus Christ, imagine being a Marine in World War II thinking you're about to storm the Pacific Islands, and instead, you get put on bat guarding duty in Texas. Anywho, next, the bomb itself, it had to be tiny, lightweight, but still able to start a serious fire. The team, which included Louis Feiser, the inventor of napalm, developed a miniature 17-gram incendiary device filled with napalm-like gel. This little firecracker was attached to the bat's chest with a surgical clip and special adhesive. But how do you arm thousands of bats? You can't exactly ask them to hold still. The solution was both clever and quite cruel. The team figured out that if you refrigerated the bats, they would go into hibernation. So they were packed into custom-made trays, basically ice cube trays for bats. This kept them dormant and easy to handle. So the final piece was the delivery system. The plan was to pack these hibernating bomb-strapped bats into a single 5-foot-long bomb-shaped canister. A B-25 bomber would fly over the target, drop the canister, and at about 1,000 feet, a parachute would deploy as the canister broke open. The sudden rush of air was supposed to wake the bats from their chilly nap. They'd fly off, find cozy new homes in the enemy's infrastructure, and then wait for the timers to do the dirty work. Scientists on the project figured a single bomber using bat bombs could start over 4,700 fires, compared to just a few hundred from a normal load of incendiaries. This was a biological firestorm. On paper, it was the perfect weapon. In reality was about to get very, very messy. And if you think the idea of bat bombs is wild, just wait until you hear what happened when they actually tried to test these things. It is a genuine masterclass in spectacular failure. But first, if you're enjoying this dive into weird history, hit the subscribe button. It helps the channel more than you know, and make sure that you don't miss the next story. All right, let's get back to the chaos. All right, so testing began in the spring of 1943 at places like Myrock Dry Lake in California, and the problems really started almost immediately. The first issue was the bats were not exactly cooperative soldiers. Some, still groggy from being chilled, didn't wake up during the drop and just plummeted into the ground like little furry rocks. Others woke up just fine, but decided they had way better things to do than fly to the mock Japanese village built for the test. They just flew off in whatever direction they felt like. But the most legendary facepalm-worthy disaster of the entire project happened in May 1943 at an auxiliary base near Carlsbad, New Mexico. The team was preparing a demonstration with a handful of bats armed with live incendiaries. What happens next was a little fuzzy. Some reports say that they were accidentally released, others say they woke up too early, but the results were undeniable. A few tiny napalm-carrying bats escaped. And where did they fly, you might ask? Straight to the brand new wooden barracks and hangar of the Carlsbad Army Airfield. The bats did what bats do and roosted under the eaves and near a fuel tank. A little while later, their timers went off. The entire base went up in flames. A hangar, the control tower, and several other buildings were incinerated. To protect the project's top-secret nature, firefighting efforts were reportedly delayed, letting the fire cause even more damage. The project had succeeded. It had spectacularly and hilariously proven that bat bombs worked. They just worked on the wrong target. The project's leader, Lytle Adams, ever the optimist, supposedly just said that the disaster just showed what 6 bats could do. After this epic self-own, the Army had had enough. They handed the hot potato to the Navy in late 1943, who gave it the official code name Project X-Ray, and then passed it to the Marine Corps for more testing. They even had successful follow-up tests where the bats burned down a mock Japanese village in Utah, and the weapon was deemed more effective than standard incendiaries. But a much bigger, more powerful shadow was rising over the war effort. While the bat bomb team was trying to keep their own bases from burning down, another group of scientists was busy with something called the Manhattan Project. By mid-1944, it was clear that the atomic bomb would be ready far sooner than the bat bombs and promised a much more definitive, if terrifying, end to the war. After spending $2 million, the military officially canceled Project X-Ray. The story of Project X-Ray is one of the great what-ifs of World War II. It is a perfect storm of wartime desperation, American ingenuity, and pure, uncut absurdity. It's easy to laugh at the idea of burning down your own airbase with napalm-strapped bats, and you should. I do. because it is hilarious, but it also shows that during the war, the military was willing to try absolutely anything to get the upper hand. I tell Adams always maintained his invention would have been devastatingly effective, possibly ending the war without the horrific cost of the atomic bomb. As he put it, think of thousands of fires breaking out simultaneously over a circle of 40 miles. Japan could have been devastated, yet with small loss of lives. We'll never know if he was right, but we do know that for a brief, bizarre moment in history, the Pentagon looked at one of nature's weirdest little fuzzy creatures and saw the future of war. They saw a furry, flying biological weapon just waiting to be unleashed. So, what do you think? Was Project X Ray a work of mad genius or just plain madness? Let me know down in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Cheers.